Ethan Carter had seen better days. As a single father struggling to make ends meet, he spent his days repairing old machines in his small garage, barely making enough to support his daughter, Lily. Every night, he lay awake wondering how he would pay the rent or put food on the table. But despite his hardships, he had never lost the one thing that defined him: his kindness. It was that same kindness that led him to an unexpected encounter, one cold evening when he stumbled upon a crashed alien ship deep in the forest. At first, he thought it was just his exhausted mind playing tricks on him, but as he got closer, he saw smoke rising from the wreckage. A strange metallic hull, covered in alien symbols, glowed faintly in the dim light. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to leave whatever had fallen from the sky alone. But then he heard a faint sound, a weak, pained voice calling for help. Against all logic, he rushed forward and found an alien woman inside, her silver skin bruised, her eyes filled with desperation. Her name was Ralvexa. She was a scientist on the run, carrying knowledge that could change the fate of entire civilizations. However, at that moment, she was nothing more than an injured stranger in need. Ethan didn't hesitate. He helped her out of the wreckage and carried her to his home. As she recovered, she explained her situation. She'd been hunted across the stars by a corrupt interstellar corporation that wanted to steal her research. If they found her, they would kill her. Ethan, despite not fully understanding the scope of galactic politics, knew one thing: he couldn't let that happen. Determined to fix her ship before her pursuers arrived, Ethan used whatever scraps and tools he had to work on the damaged systems. The technology was far beyond anything he had ever seen, but his sharp mind quickly adapted. Ralvexa, initially doubtful of a human's ability to repair such advanced machinery, watched in amazement as Ethan found creative ways to bypass broken circuits, replace burned-out components, and even improve some of the ship's failing systems with nothing but human ingenuity. His daughter, Lily, fascinated by their alien guest, brought food and sat beside them, listening intently to their conversations. Ralvexa, despite her initial wariness, softened towards the child and began teaching her small things about the stars and the wonders of the universe. Days passed and the ship was nearly functional again. But just as hope started to build, the danger they feared arrived. A sleek black vessel descended from the sky, carrying mercenaries with weapons far more advanced than anything Earth had ever seen. The hunters had tracked Ralvexa, and they had no intention of letting her escape. Ethan knew they couldn't fight them head-on. So, using his knowledge of the land and the traps he had set up, he lured the mercenaries into an ambush. He used every trick he could think of, leading them through the thickest parts of the forest, sabotaging their equipment, and even using the ship's half-repaired defense systems to gain an advantage. Ralvexa, though injured, fought alongside him, impressed by his determination. Finally, after a desperate struggle, the mercenaries were forced to retreat, unwilling to risk further losses against a single stubborn human. With the immediate threat gone, Ralvexa knew she had to leave before more hunters arrived. The ship was finally ready, and she could escape to safety. Standing at the open hatch, she turned to Ethan and his daughter. She owed them her life, but more than that, she'd found something she never expected: a true friend among the stars. She promised that she would never forget what he had done for her. Before Ethan could say anything, she pressed a small, strange device into his hands and told him to keep it safe. Then, with one final glance at the planet that had given her a second chance, she took off into the sky, vanishing into the stars. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan returned to his routine, unsure if he would ever see her again. He kept the device Ralvexa had given him, but he didn't know what it was until one night when curiosity got the better of him. He activated it, and suddenly a holographic blueprint appeared before him. What he saw left him breathless. It was a design for a revolutionary energy source, something that could change the world forever. With careful study, Ethan realized that he had been handed the key to an invention that could make fossil fuels obsolete. At first, he couldn't believe it. But as he tested the theories, he saw that it worked. This wasn't just a gift, it was a fortune beyond his imagination. With the help of his engineering skills, Ethan patented the technology and soon found himself at the center of a technological revolution. The world hailed him as a genius, and overnight, he became one of the wealthiest men on Earth. His days of struggling for survival were over, and for the first time, he could provide everything his daughter had ever dreamed of. But wealth did not change him. He used his fortune to improve lives, just as his kindness had once saved Ralvexa. Years passed, and Ethan's name became known across planets, though few knew the real story of his success. Then one evening, as he stood on the balcony of his towering estate, gazing at the stars, a familiar ship descended from the sky. As the ramp lowered, Ralvexa stepped out, no longer a fugitive, but a powerful scientist who had changed the fate of her people. They stood there for a moment, two individuals who had once been strangers from different worlds, now bound by an unbreakable bond. She had promised to repay his kindness, but in truth, she had already given him everything. And as they stood under the endless sky, Ethan realized something: kindness was the greatest fortune of all. Ethan Carter was a man who had learned to live with struggle. As a single father raising his young daughter, Sarah, he spent every day fixing old machines in his small workshop, trying to make enough money to keep a roof over their heads. Life had been hard since his wife passed away, and every month, the bills piled up higher than before. Despite the exhaustion weighing him down, he never let it show in front of Sarah. She was the only reason he kept going. But fate had something unexpected in store for him. One stormy night, as he drove home from work, he saw something crash in the woods. At first, he thought it was a meteor, but when he got closer, he saw the wreckage of a strange metallic ship, its surface covered in glowing alien symbols. Smoke hissed from broken panels, and sparks flickered in the darkness. His first instinct was to turn back. This was something far beyond his understanding. But then, through the twisted wreckage, he saw movement. A figure, barely conscious, reached out weakly. Without hesitation, Ethan climbed through the wreckage and found a woman unlike any he had ever seen. Her silver-blue skin shimmered in the moonlight, and her violet eyes flickered with exhaustion. She was clearly injured, her breathing shallow. Even though she was an alien, something in her expression reminded him of a lost traveler, someone who needed help. Against all logic, he carried her to his truck and took her home. When she awoke, she introduced herself as Vexia, a scientist from a distant star system. She had been fleeing from a dangerous corporation that wanted to steal her research knowledge that could change the galaxy. Her ship was beyond repair, and she had nowhere to go. Ethan knew that hiding an alien in his home was dangerous, but he couldn't just turn her away. Determined to fix what he could, Ethan spent the next few days examining the wreckage, hoping to repair at least some of its systems. The technology was unlike anything on Earth, but his sharp mind quickly adapted. Using salvaged parts and a bit of human ingenuity, he managed to restore some basic functions. Vexia watched in amazement. She had always believed humans were primitive compared to the rest of the galaxy, but Ethan's resourcefulness proved otherwise. As they worked together, Sarah became fascinated with Vexia, asking endless questions about space and alien worlds. Vexia, despite her situation, grew fond of the child and taught her about the stars, sharing stories of distant civilizations and wonders beyond human imagination. But peace never lasts. One evening, as Ethan worked late in his garage, he noticed strange lights in the sky. His heart pounded as he realized what they were: ships. The corporation had tracked Vexia to Earth. They weren't coming for negotiations. They were coming to take what they wanted by force. Rushing inside, he found Vexia staring at the approaching ships, her expression tense. She knew they would not leave without her. But Ethan refused to let them take her. With no advanced weapons or military power, he relied on the only thing humans had always been good at: outsmarting the enemy. Using an old generator, he overloaded the wrecked ship's remaining energy cells, creating an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to disable the tracking systems of the approaching ships. Then, using a combination of his garage's old machines and Vexia's technology, he set up traps around his property. When the mercenaries landed, they found themselves facing unexpected resistance. Ethan led them into an ambush, using hidden explosives and mechanical distractions to confuse and disorient them. Vexia, though weak, used the last of her ship's remaining energy weapons to strike back. The mercenaries, unprepared for such resistance from a single human, retreated before they could suffer greater losses. The battle was won, but Ethan knew they would return. With no time to waste, Vexia activated the last function of her damaged ship, a distress beacon, to call for help from her people. Hours later, another alien vessel arrived, this time a friendly one. They had come to take Vexia home. As she stood at the entrance of the ship, she turned to Ethan and Sarah. She owed them more than just her life, she owed them her future. Before leaving, she handed Ethan a small metallic device and told him to guard it carefully. Then, with one final look, she disappeared into the stars. At first, Ethan didn't know what to do with the strange device. It looked like nothing more than a small, smooth disk. But when he finally activated it, his world changed forever. A holographic blueprint appeared before him, displaying a technology far beyond anything on Earth. It was an energy source unlike any human had ever seen, clean, powerful, and unlimited. Realizing what he had been given, Ethan spent months studying it. With his engineering skills, he was able to recreate the technology and soon filed for patents that would revolutionize the world. His invention eliminated humanity's reliance on fossil fuels, changing industries overnight. And with success came fortune. He was no longer the struggling mechanic barely scraping by. Years passed, and Ethan Carter became a name known across the world. He was no longer just a father trying to survive. He was a visionary, a leader in technological advancement. But despite all his wealth and power, he never forgot the reason for his success. He used his fortune to build a better world for his daughter and to prepare humanity for the future beyond Earth. And then, one evening, as he stood on the balcony of his massive estate, gazing at the stars, a familiar ship descended from the sky. As the ramp lowered, Vexia stepped out, no longer a fugitive but a respected scientist, a leader among her people. They stood in silence for a moment, both knowing that their paths had been forever changed by a single act of kindness. She had promised to repay him one day, but in truth, she had already given him everything. And as they looked out into the vast universe, Ethan realized that this was only the beginning. The stars were no longer out of reach. Humanity was ready to take its place among them. Ethan Walker never expected his life to change the night he found the wreckage. As a struggling mechanic and a single father to his 10-year-old son, Adam, he had long accepted that his world would never stretch beyond the limits of his small town. Every day was a battle repairing broken-down cars for barely enough pay, fighting off eviction notices, and making sure Adam never went to bed hungry. But fate had other plans. It was a quiet, cold night when he took the long road home, his old truck rattling over the worn asphalt. Then, out of nowhere, the sky split open with a streak of fire. Something massive fell from the heavens, crashing into the dense forest beyond the hills. His first thought was a plane crash, maybe a meteor. But as he pulled over and ran through the dark trees, he saw something far more impossible, a sleek, silver vessel, half buried in the earth, smoke hissing from its cracked hull. And beside it, barely conscious, was an alien woman. She had deep blue skin that shimmered in the moonlight, her short, silver hair matted with blood. She was clearly injured, her body covered in strange, form-fitting armor that flickered with failing energy. Despite the pain in her glowing violet eyes, she looked at Ethan with something more than fear determination. She was a survivor. And yet, she was completely alone. Ethan hesitated. He had no idea who she was, what she wanted, or if helping her was even safe. But then she spoke, her voice weak yet firm. "They will come for me. I cannot be found." There was desperation in her tone, something that went beyond personal survival. Against every instinct screaming at him to run, Ethan made his decision. He pulled her over his shoulder and carried her back to his truck. Whatever trouble she was in, she wasn't facing it alone anymore. Back at his small house, hidden in the outskirts of town, Ethan tended to her wounds as best he could. The alien woman, who introduced herself as Kalara, explained that she was a scientist from a distant world. She had stolen something, a device containing knowledge worth more than entire planets. A ruthless galactic syndicate, the Zydran Consortium, was hunting her, willing to kill anyone who stood in their way. Her ship had been damaged in the chase, and now she was stranded on Earth, helpless. Ethan listened, unable to believe that the universe was so much bigger than he had ever imagined. But more than that, he understood one simple truth: Kalara was just as lost and desperate as he had been his entire life. Determined to help, Ethan spent the next few days sneaking out to the wreckage, salvaging whatever he could. His skills as a mechanic were useless against alien technology, but that didn't stop him from trying. Kalara, despite her injuries, guided him, impressed by his ability to adapt. As they worked together, a strange understanding formed between them. She was used to a universe where humans were seen as primitive, unworthy of real significance. But Ethan? He was proof that intelligence came in many forms. His quick thinking and problem-solving skills rivaled some of the best minds she'd encountered. Even Adam, who quickly warmed up to their mysterious guest, marveled at the wonders. Kalara spoke of the vastness of space, the infinite possibilities beyond Earth. But their fragile peace was short-lived. One evening, as Ethan was working on the remains of Kalara's ship, the night was shattered by a distant hum. A ship, far larger than hers, descended from the sky, its dark hull glistening under the moonlight. The Zedran consortium had arrived. Kalara's face went pale. They found me. Ethan barely had time to react before heavily armed figures emerged from the trees. Their armor was sleek, their weapons unlike anything he had ever seen. They weren't here for negotiations. They were here to erase all traces of Kalara and her stolen knowledge. But Ethan was no stranger to a fight. He had spent his whole life battling against the odds. With no advanced weapons, no military training, he did the only thing he could. He used the land, the traps he had set up over the years for hunting, and the unpredictable chaos of human ingenuity. The mercenaries expected an easy capture. What they got was an all-out war. Ethan led them into the thickest parts of the forest, setting off explosions using nothing but old gasoline tanks and jury-rigged devices. Kalara, though weak, fought beside him, using what little remained of her technology to disrupt their signals and weapons. The battle was fierce, but together they managed to drive the mercenaries back. The Zedran ship, damaged and unable to track them any further, was forced to retreat. The danger wasn't over, but Kalara knew one thing: Ethan Walker wasn't just some mechanic. He was a fighter. A survivor. And in that moment, she made a decision that would change his life forever. With her ship beyond repair, she revealed the device she had stolen, a compact data core containing blueprints for revolutionary technology. With this knowledge, entire civilizations could change overnight. "I cannot stay," she said. "But this is my gift to you." She placed the device in Ethan's hands, knowing that he would understand its value. At first, Ethan didn't know what to do with it. But over time, he studied the information, learning secrets that no human had ever known. He used the technology to develop new energy sources, advancements in medicine, and innovations that pushed humanity forward by centuries. Within years, Ethan Walker became a name known across the world. His inventions transformed Earth, and his once small life expanded far beyond what he had ever imagined. No longer the struggling mechanic, no longer the man barely holding on, he was now a legend. But even with all the fortune and power he gained, he never forgot the deal he had made that night. A deal sealed with trust, with sacrifice, with the unbreakable bond between a human and an alien who had once been nothing more than a stranger in the dark. Then, one evening, as he stood on the balcony of his towering estate, looking at the stars that had changed his fate, a familiar ship descended from the sky. As the ramp lowered, Kalara stepped out, no longer a fugitive, but a leader in her own right. They stood there, two beings from different worlds, knowing that their story was far from over. Because in the grand scheme of the universe, some deals last a lifetime, and some echo through the stars forever. Logan Hayes had never believed in fate. To him, life was a series of problems that needed fixing, and if you didn't have the tools, you found a way to make them yourself. As a struggling mechanic, his days were filled with repairing broken cars in a rundown shop on the outskirts of town, barely making enough to support himself and his teenage daughter, Lily. Ever since his wife had passed away, it had been just the two of them, and Logan had done everything in his power to ensure Lily had a future, even if it meant working long hours, sacrificing sleep, and fighting off the constant fear of losing everything. But nothing in his life had prepared him for the night that changed everything. It was late, past midnight, when he heard the explosion. The ground trembled, and a blinding blue light cut across the sky, vanishing behind the hills beyond the highway. He should have ignored it, should have turned the other way and gone home. But something inside him wouldn't let him. So, against his better judgment, he grabbed his flashlight, got into his rusted pickup truck, and drove toward the crash site. What he found was impossible. A sleek metallic ship, unlike anything on Earth, lay in the middle of a smoking crater. Strange glowing symbols flickered along its surface, and the air was thick with the scent of burned metal and something else, something unnatural. Logan had seen a lot of broken machines in his life, but this was different. This was something that didn't belong on Earth. And then he saw her. A woman, or at least something close to one, lay unconscious near the wreckage. Her skin was a deep shade of emerald, her silver hair tangled and matted with blood. She wore a suit that seemed alive, pulsing with dim energy. She was breathing barely. Logan hesitated only for a second before he scooped her up and carried her to his truck. He didn't know who she was, where she had come from, or what bringing her home would mean. But he couldn't just leave her there. Back at his garage, Logan worked fast. He had no idea how to treat alien injuries, but he did what he could, cleaning her wounds, bandaging the cuts. It took hours before she finally stirred. Her glowing yellow eyes snapped open, locking onto him. For a moment, he thought she might attack, but then her gaze softened, filled with something he couldn't quite place. Relief? Her name was Alira. She was not just an alien, she was an engineer, a builder of starships. But she wasn't just any engineer. She was running from people who wanted to use her knowledge for war. She had escaped, stolen plans for a technology that could change the balance of power in the galaxy, and now she was stranded on Earth with no way to leave. Logan didn't understand everything she told him, but he knew one thing: she was in trouble. And now, so was he. Despite knowing the risks, Logan made a choice. He would help her fix her ship. It wasn't just about the danger. He saw something in Alira's eyes, something familiar. She was lost, alone, desperate to find a way forward. Just like he had been after losing his wife. Just like he had been every day since, trying to fix a life that had been shattered. Days turned into weeks. Logan and Alira worked side by side in his garage, combining human tools with alien technology, salvaging parts from the wreckage. She was brilliant, her mind working in ways Logan couldn't even begin to understand. But he wasn't useless either. His hands, rough from years of labor, found ways to repair things she had thought were beyond saving. Where she relied on science, he relied on instinct, and together they made progress. Lily, at first terrified, quickly became fascinated by Alira, asking endless questions about space, other worlds, and the technology she had never imagined. Alira, despite everything, grew fond of the girl, telling her stories of distant galaxies, teaching her about things no human had ever known. For the first time in years, Logan felt something he hadn't in a long time: purpose. But the peace didn't last. One night, Alira's expression darkened as she examined a blinking signal on a recovered device. They had been found. The people she had escaped from, mercenaries working for a powerful galactic syndicate, were coming for her. And they wouldn't leave without taking what she knew. Logan knew running wasn't an option. Fighting them head-on was suicide. So he did what he did best: he improvised. He worked through the night, using every trick he had ever learned, modifying Alira's damaged systems with parts from his own machines. When the ships arrived, sleek and deadly, they expected an easy victory. What they didn't expect was resistance. Logan had rigged the garage with makeshift electromagnetic disruptors, causing the mercenaries' weapons to short-circuit. He used decoys, smoke, and explosive traps built from scrap metal and engine fuel, turning his small workshop into a battlefield. Alira, though exhausted, fought beside him, using what little power remained in her tech to sabotage the enemy's systems. Lily, hidden safely in the back, watched in awe as her father, just a simple mechanic, took on warriors from another world. It was chaos. It was impossible. And yet, somehow, they won. The mercenaries, disoriented and outmaneuvered, were forced to retreat, realizing the cost of capturing Alira was too high. As the dust settled, Alira looked at Logan with something deeper than gratitude. She had never met a human before, never thought they were more than primitive beings lost in their own small world. But Logan Hayes had proven her wrong. He wasn't just a mechanic. He wasn't just a struggling father trying to survive. He was something far greater, a man who refused to accept fate, who fought to fix what was broken, no matter the odds. The ship was still damaged, but together they finished what they started. As dawn broke over the horizon, but before stepping inside, she handed Logan a small device, a single glowing crystal. "This contains knowledge beyond anything your world has seen," she said. "Use it wisely. Use it to fix what's broken." And then she was gone. Logan stood there for a long time, watching as her ship disappeared into the sky. In his hands, he held something that could change the fate of humanity. He wasn't sure what he would do with it yet. But one thing was certain: his life, his destiny, had already changed. Because fate wasn't something written in stone. It wasn't something beyond control. It was something you built, piece by piece. And if it was broken, you fixed it. Jace Carter had spent his whole life fixing things. Broken engines, worn-out machines, rusted-out farm equipment, anything people brought to his small repair shop in the middle of nowhere. He never asked too many questions. He just did the work, collected his pay, and moved on. Life was simple that way. No complications, no surprises. But all of that changed the night something crashed in the empty fields beyond his shop. It was late, past midnight, and Jace was locking up when he saw the sky split open with a streak of fire. Whatever it wasn't a plane. It wasn't a meteor either. It moved too fast, too deliberately. His instincts told him to stay out of it, to pretend he never saw anything. But curiosity and something deeper, something unexplainable, pushed him forward. Grabbing his flashlight, he jumped into his truck and drove toward the smoke rising in the distance. What he found was impossible. A sleek, metallic pod was buried deep in the dirt, steam hissing from its cracked surface. The design was unlike anything Jace had ever seen. Not military, not experimental, something completely alien. And then he saw her. A woman, or at least something close to one, was slumped against the wreckage. Her skin shimmered a dark shade of violet under the moonlight, her silver eyes barely open as she struggled to move. She was injured, her body covered in strange, form-fitting armor that flickered with dying energy. Jace hesitated. He knew this wasn't just some lost traveler. She wasn't human. She didn't belong here. But she was hurt, alone, and in trouble. And Jace had never been the kind of man to walk away from someone who needed help. He knelt beside her, speaking softly. She flinched at first, but then, with great effort, whispered a single word: help. That was all he needed to hear. He carried her back to his shop, laying her down on the old cot he kept in the back. He had no idea how to treat alien injuries, so he did the next best thing: he made her comfortable and waited. It wasn't long before she regained consciousness. Her name was Riza, and she was not just an alien. She was a traveler, an engineer, and, most importantly, a fugitive. She had escaped from a powerful faction known as the Syndicate, a ruthless empire that controlled entire systems with an iron grip. She had stolen something, a piece of technology that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. But in her escape, her ship had been damaged, forcing her to crash land on Earth. Now, she was stranded, with no way to call for help, no way to leave. And the Syndicate? They would come looking. Jace didn't know much about space or galactic politics, but he knew machines. And a broken ship? That was something he could fix. For days, Jace and Riza worked together, salvaging what they could from the wreckage. Her technology was beyond anything he had ever seen, but he learned quickly, adapting his skills in ways he never thought possible. Riza, despite her initial distrust, was impressed. Humans, she had been told, were primitive, insignificant in the grand scale of the universe. But Jace Carter? He was different. He had the mind of a builder, the hands of a craftsman, and the heart of a man who refused to give you p.as. They worked, they talked. Riza told him of the stars, of worlds beyond imagination, of civilizations far more advanced than Earth. Jace listened, fascinated. His whole life, he had thought of himself as small, just a simple mechanic in a forgotten corner of the world. But now, he saw the universe for what it was: limitless, full of possibilities he had never dared to dream of. But their time was running out. One evening, as Jace was fine-tuning a makeshift energy converter, Ryza froze, her face pale. A signal! A beacon! The Syndicate had found her. They had to move fast. The ship wasn't ready, but it would have to be enough. Jace worked through the night, pushing his skills beyond anything he thought he was capable of. Ryza helped as much as she could, but she knew the truth: this wasn't just about fixing a ship anymore. This was about survival. Then, just before dawn, the sky rumbled. A sleek black vessel descended from the clouds, its engines whisper quiet. The Syndicate had arrived. And they weren't here for negotiations. Jace barely had time to react before the mercenaries emerged, tall, armored figures with weapons that glowed with dangerous energy. They moved with cold precision, surrounding the shop in seconds. Ryza stepped forward, defiant despite her injuries. But Jace wasn't about to let her face them alone. He had no weapons, no training. Just his wits, his instincts, and the workshop he had spent his life mastering. He had spent years fixing things. But tonight, he was going to break a few. With the flick of a switch, he activated a series of makeshift traps, rigged pressure valves, released blinding steam, electromagnets yanked weapons from unprepared hands, and hastily modified tools became weapons in ways they were never designed to be. The mercenaries expected a simple extraction. Instead, they walked into a battlefield designed by a man who knew every inch of the space they were standing in. The fight was brutal. Jace took hits, but he refused to go down. Ryza, though weakened, fought beside him, using her last reserves of energy to disable their attackers. The Syndicate had numbers. But Jace and Ryza had something stronger: desperation, determination, and the will to survive. By the time the sun began to rise, the Syndicate ship was gone, retreating into the sky. They hadn't won, not really. But they had survived. And sometimes that was enough. With the danger past, there was only one thing left to do: finish the repairs. With a final adjustment, the ship roared to life. The damage wasn't completely fixed, but it was enough for Ryza to leave, to escape before the Syndicate returned with more forces. She stood before Jace, hesitation in her eyes. "Come with me," she said. Jace looked back at his shop, at the only life he had ever known. Then he looked up at the stars. For the first time, he saw them not as distant, unreachable lights, but as destinations. As possibilities. Maybe it was time to fix something bigger than broken machines. With nothing left to lose, he stepped onto the ship. The ramp closed behind him. The engines roared. And with one small repair, his entire future changed forever.